Hey guys, tonight, we're going to do something a little risky. You've just fallen asleep in your cozy, air-conditioned bedroom, and before you know it, boom. You're waking up in a cold, damp field somewhere outside a medieval English village. Your iPhone's dead. Your sneakers are gone and your hoodie has been swapped for something that feels suspiciously like burlap. The sky is gray. The air smells like wet soil, wood smoke, and something unpleasantly human. And there's a man staring at you like you owe him rent. You're not dreaming. You've time-slipped straight into the 14th century. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You try to ask someone where you are. You say, "Hi, can you help me?" They blink. You try again louder, which of course always helps. "Excuse me." Still nothing. The man mumbles something back, and it's definitely English, but not the kind you learned in school. It's Middle English. A chewy, tangled knot of Germanic roots, French sprinkles, and vowel sounds that sound like they've been beaten with a ladle. It gets worse. If the person is noble, they might be speaking Norman French. If he's part of the church, prepare for Latin. You with your flawless modern slang are suddenly the linguistic equivalent of a houseplant. No one's going to explain anything to you. You're just standing there, mouth open, like someone dropped in from another planet. Which, to be fair, you sort of were. Historians still argue whether a modern English speaker could recognize more than a handful of Middle English phrases in context. Sure, you might catch a good morrow or guess that wife means woman, but you're not stringing a sentence together unless you've got a degree in medieval literature or a time-traveling dictionary. But let's say you somehow manage to nod and smile your way into a nearby village. It's muddy, narrow, and packed with low timbered houses that look like they're one strong wind away from collapsing. A woman in a long dress is throwing something suspiciously brown into the street. You sidestep just in time. You'll be doing a lot of that. Chamber pots aren't emptied quietly. A small boy stares at you. He's barefoot. He might be 5 or maybe 10. It's hard to tell because he's already missing teeth. He points at your clothes or what's left of them and laughs. You laugh too, mostly out of panic. You try to introduce yourself. "My name is Alex." Blank stares. You pantomime writing. The villagers don't look impressed. Most can't read. Literacy in the 1300s, not common. And even if someone can write, the letters look different. Your neatly printed alphabet soup means nothing here. One man finally approaches, older, gray-bearded, and wearing what looks like a burlap sack with a belt. He tries Latin. You blink. He tries again, slower, as if that helps. You shake your head, and he sighs, looking you over like you're a lost sheep. He says something short, sharp, and possibly annoyed. Then he claps your shoulder hard enough to jolt your spine and points toward the woods. You don't know what it means, but you get the feeling you're not being invited to brunch. And you're thirsty. Like really thirsty. No one hands you a bottle of spring water. You look for a stream and find a trickle of brownish water running through the village ditch. You remember something about boiling water. Except there's no fire, no pot, and nothing to boil with. You cup your hands and take the tiniest sip and instantly regret it. It tastes like copper and compost. Fun fact, the concept of clean water wasn't really a thing yet. People drank ale or weak wine because it was safer than the local stream. You, however, just got a mouthful of medieval dysentery. Your stomach's already rumbling. And there's no corner store, no vending machine. You sniff the air hoping for food. Someone is baking bread. You follow your nose like a cartoon character. But the woman inside sees you lurking and slams her door. Fair enough, you do look like a very confused outlaw in a hoodie skirt hybrid. You sit down, trying not to panic. A group of villagers gathers to stare. Someone mutters the word devil or maybe witch. Either way, you're not making friends. A few cross themselves. One boy throws a clod of dirt at you, giggles, and runs. The crowd disperses, but you now have a new companion, a flea. Actually, you have several. They came with the hay bale you sat on. You scratch your arm. You'll be doing that a lot, too. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval villagers believed fleas were sent by God to keep people humble. Others thought they were tiny demons. Either way, no one's handing you bug spray. You stand up dizzy. Your head spins. Maybe it's hunger, or the language barrier, or the mild waterborne illness you just acquired. You stagger a little. Someone sees, frowns, and starts walking toward the local priest. This can't be good. Because guess what? If you seem different, foreign, or a little touched, people get nervous. And nervous medieval people aren't gentle. Your heart is racing. But there's no ER, no therapist, no "can I speak to a manager" energy to cling to. Just a creaky wooden world that doesn't know what to do with you and might decide to solve the problem with a pitchfork. You try to laugh at yourself. Just yesterday you were annoyed that your iced coffee had the wrong milk. Now you're hoping not to be accused of sorcery because you wore shoelaces. You're not even 1 hour into your Dark Ages debut, and already the village wants you gone. You try to shake off the crowd's suspicion and wander toward a quieter part of the village, but if your luck was bad, before it's about to get personal. Because in this part of the Middle Ages, your odds of surviving the day just got a lot worse, especially if you happen to be a woman. Let's imagine you were time-warped, not just into a random century, but into a female body. Maybe you still thinking with a 21st century brain, still craving an oat milk latte, but now the world sees you as woman. And in medieval terms, that means two main options: marry or join a convent. There is no neither. No backpacking across Europe, no career path, no podcast. Your life is a straight line, and it's headed straight for a husband. You probably didn't choose a pregnancy that might kill you and a grave that might beat your 33rd birthday. You glance down. No matter how you're dressed, it's not modest enough. Your hair is showing. Maybe your ankles. That's already scandalous. Medieval church teachings, especially from guys like St. Paul, describe women as morally weak, naturally sinful, and in constant need of male control. Great. A nearby woman eyes you with a mix of pity and judgment. She's young, but her face looks older than it should, sun-worn, work-hardened. She's carrying a bucket in each hand, but still manages to shoo a toddler away from the well. You wonder how many children she's had, or buried. Probably both. Historians still argue whether medieval women had more agency than we give them credit for, but when it came to safety and survival, the cards were stacked. Especially when childbirth entered the picture. Let's say you chose marriage. That's generous, since families often arranged it young, like disturbingly young. You're expected to cook, weave, spin, wool, care for livestock, raise children, and help in the fields. This is not a division of labor, it's just everything. And if you're lucky, you get to do it for 20 years before your spine gives out and your teeth fall out. Your husband is legally your superior. In public, you walk behind him. At church, you kneel lower. In court, your testimony might not count at all. And then comes pregnancy. You hope it's one child. It's never just one child. There's no contraception, no modern medicine, and definitely no epidurals. You'll give birth squatting over straw while a local woman boils water and prays. There's a 50-50 chance your baby survives, and a solid 1 in 5 chance you don't. In fact, in places like 15th century Florence, 1 in every 5 women died giving birth. And that's the city statistics. Rural numbers were worse. You probably wouldn't even get to hold your baby before being urged to write a will. Yes, that was a thing. Women were encouraged to settle their affairs because dying in labor wasn't tragic. It was expected. A quirky detail for you cesarean sections did exist, but only if the mother was already dead or dying. That's not a medical choice. It's a last-ditch effort to save the baby, assuming the stars align and someone has a steady hand with a knife. But hey, maybe you're lucky. Maybe you're a nun. Life in the convent isn't exactly luxurious, but at least it comes with fewer pregnancies and a little bit more education. Some nuns could read, write, even teach. But freedom, not really. You're still owned just by God now. And you'll spend your days in silence, prayer, and hard labor. With one fun twist, if someone accuses you of sinning, you can be locked in a cell for the rest of your life. For real. Back outside, you're still walking, still dodging mud and eyes. Someone calls you a hussy in Middle English. You don't understand it, but the tone is clear enough. You pull your hood tighter, though it doesn't help. People see what they want to see, and if you try to defend yourself, raise your voice. Say you're not who they think you are. That's worse. A woman speaking boldly is dangerous. What are you possessed? A witch, if you're caught reading or showing too much curiosity. Congratulations, you're suspicious now. And suspicious in this era is about 2 steps away from burnable. You duck into a stable to catch your breath. It's warmer here, but not cleaner. The air is thick with the scent of hay and manure. A cat stares at you from the rafters, and you wonder if she's been accused of witchcraft too. You joke to yourself she probably has better odds of survival, and you're not wrong. Back in the village square, you hear shouting. A woman is being scolded publicly for speaking out during Mass. Her husband stands beside her silent. She's crying, but she won't be comforted. Not here. That could be seen as defiance. And yes, medieval women did have moments of joy, friendship, faith, laughter by the fire. But they had to find it in cracks between danger. They built lives in the shadows of systems that didn't see them. Or worse, saw them only as problems to be controlled. You think of home, your own time, your own bed. The freedom to speak, to move, to choose. To survive childbirth. To make a mistake without losing your life. Right now, you'd give anything for a tampon and a slice of pizza. You close your eyes just for a second. The stable door creaks open again, and this time, they're looking for you. You duck farther into the stable, tucking yourself between a stack of hay and a wooden beam, trying to slow your breath. But there's nowhere to go. No exit strategy, no panic button. You're a stranger in a world where strangers don't last long, especially ones who can't explain why they don't have a proper accent or why they keep muttering about Google Maps. The voices outside fade, and for a while there's only the sound of the wind nudging loose shutters and a soft whinny from one of the horses. You try to gather your thoughts, but your stomach has other plans. It growls loudly, and it hits you haven't eaten. Not just today, since whenever this medieval nightmare began. And suddenly you realize you're starving in a place where half the people are already halfway to starving all the time. But before we get to that, let's rewind a little. Let's talk about what happens if you were unlucky enough to be born in this time. Because truthfully, most of you wouldn't have made it this far. From the moment of conception, the odds were against you. Prenatal care, forget it. Your medieval mother might have been guzzling weak ale daily during pregnancy, not out of neglect, but because the water was too dirty to drink. Fetal alcohol syndrome wasn't even a concept yet. Add in a diet low in essential nutrients and high in fungus-ridden grains, and well, you didn't exactly enter the world with a great head start. And childbirth. You've already heard how dangerous it is for women. But for babies, it was a game of dice, 2 slippery ones rolled on a dirt floor. Midwives did their best, of course, but infections were common. Umbilical cords were mysterious, and there was no such thing as incubator's oxygen or even the knowledge of germs. If you were born breech or too early or even on a cold night, your first few hours could be your last. And let's say you did survive the birth. Congrats, tiny you. Now you're a newborn in a wooden house with no insulation, no heating, no medical care, and a high chance that your family can't even afford to feed you. Infant mortality was heartbreakingly common. In many parts of medieval Europe, roughly 1 in 3 children died before reaching the age of 5. In certain regions and years, the number crept even higher. And remember, historians still argue whether these numbers understate the real losses. Because peasants didn't keep birth certificates. No one wrote down the names of children who only lived a few hours or a few days. In some places, parents wouldn't even name a child until it survived its first year. Because naming made the grief worse. By age 2 or 3, if you were still alive, you probably weren't toddling around with a stuffed animal you were helping. Carrying kindling, chasing chickens, learning how to sweep. No preschool, no cartoons. Just chores. Childhood wasn't a phase, it was a race to adulthood. And then come the illnesses. All the lovely, avoidable ones we vaccinate for today: measles, whooping cough, diphtheria, stomach flu, infected cuts. A scraped knee could fester into something deadly. A fever could spiral out of control without a single person knowing why. There's one word that comes up again and again in medieval records flux. It basically meant diarrhea to death. And it was as common as dirt. Because dirt was everywhere. In the food, in the water, under your fingernails, and in the clothes you were swaddled in. If you were lucky, someone wiped your mouth with a clean rag. If you weren't, let's not go there. Let's also talk about grief. Because while death was common, that didn't make it easy. Parents mourned. They buried children under fruit trees or in quiet corners of the churchyard. They carved tiny crosses. They whispered names they never got to say out loud. Some left symbols in the margins of prayer books, little marks for lives that slipped away too soon. There's a record from Japan, not Europe, but a similar medieval time frame, where nearly 48% of the population died as children. That's almost every second child. You see why people turned to religion, to charms, to any scrap of hope they could cling to. Here's a quirky detail in parts of medieval England. If a baby died before it could be baptized, people believed its soul was trapped in limbo forever. That's why even in snowstorms or plagues, parents would rush to a priest, desperate to get the ritual done. Not for status, for salvation. But let's say you make it past infancy. You're 5 now. Your job: stay out of the way and try not to die. You learn early not to touch certain mushrooms, not to get too close to pigs with foaming mouths, not to drink from the well if it smells like cabbage. You're not taught these things with picture books. You learn by watching, or by watching someone else fail. Historians still debate how much affection medieval parents showed their children, especially peasant families. Some say parents grew emotionally distant as a form of protection. Others say that's nonsense, and that even in the harshest times, parents loved fiercely. What's clear is that whatever love they had, they loved against the odds. You watch your little brother die from a fever that won't break. You hold your baby sister's hand until it goes cold. You bury friends, and still you wake up the next day because there's grain to grind and goats to milk. By now, back in your time-traveling body, your stomach's in full rebellion. You haven't eaten in hours, maybe longer, and there's no pantry to raid. You wander back into the village and spot a small child with a crust of bread. He's licking it like candy. You think about asking, but something in his hollow eyes tells you not to. A woman nearby is stirring something in a pot. It smells vaguely edible. You move closer, hopeful. She scowls, but lets you peer in. It's pottage, a kind of grain and root stew that's been cooking for days. It looks like beige mud and tastes like old turnip. But right now, it might be the best thing you've ever seen. She gives you a ladleful. You burn your tongue but finish every drop. It doesn't last. You're still hungry, still weak. And now you're remembering that in this world, one bad crop can mean famine. One hard winter can mean mass graves. Children don't survive easily in the Middle Ages. But what's worse, sometimes they survive just enough to remember what they lost. You're standing in the middle of a muddy path, now a little steadier thanks to the warm pottage still settling in your stomach. The air is thick with smoke from a dozen chimneyless houses. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows like it's auditioning for a horror movie. A skinny dog trots past with something unidentifiable in its mouth, and you still reeling from the brutal realities of medieval childhood. Start to feel that creeping question rise in your chest. Who exactly am I in this world? And the answer, of course, is simple. You're a peasant, not a merchant, not a monk, definitely not a noble. You are a serf. A word that sounds harmless until you learn what it really means, tied to the land, tied to your lord, tied to a life where freedom isn't even a concept, let alone an option. In this world, 85% of the population are just like you, poor, dirty, and bound by rules written by people you'll never meet. And you belong to someone, literally. Your labor, your body, your children, everything you have and are, is considered part of the estate. You don't get to leave. You don't get to ask questions. You don't get to say no. You are, in the softest sense of the word, property. You turn slowly, taking in the sights again. That crooked little village you hoped was just a rest stop. It's your prison. You can't move to another town without written permission from your lord. Want to marry the girl from the next field over, ask permission. Want to travel to the market a few miles away? Better get that stamped. Want to join a monastery just to escape this dirt-caked life? Too bad your lord paid a tax for you and he's not letting you go. Historians still argue how much autonomy serfs really had, whether they could push back, negotiate, or buy their way out of bondage. But in practical terms, you're stuck. And worse, you're stuck with work. Endless, back-breaking, thankless work. There's no clock-in, clock-out system, no lunch breaks. The concept of weekend hasn't been invented yet. Your day begins when the light creeps over the fields and ends when the sky turns black. You till soil, sow seeds, harvest grain, feed animals, chop wood, dig trenches, mend fences, wash clothes, carry water, scrub dishes, fix thatched roofs, and oh yeah, try not to die while doing all of it. Your fingers are cracked. Your knees are always sore. Your back has aged 20 years in just one. The land you work doesn't belong to you. The house you sleep in is technically someone else's. Even your tools are borrowed or cobbled together from scraps. And if you think complaining helps, just remember one raised voice can get you fined, beaten, or banished to the woods. You share your one-room home with a spouse, maybe a few kids, and often a goat or pig for warmth. Privacy doesn't exist. Bathing isn't a habit. It's an event, one that requires firewood water and enormous effort. You wash maybe a few times a year if you're lucky, and most of the time, the lice just become part of the furniture. Your clothes are hand-stitched wool, itchy damp, and patched so many times, they're more mending than material. You own one set, maybe two if your family's doing okay. Shoes only in winter, and even then probably homemade. And let's not forget the weather, because everything depends on the weather. Too much rain, crops rot. Not enough rain, crops die. Early frost, starvation season. A single bad harvest means hunger. 2 in a row means famine. There's no insurance, no relief fund, no local food bank. When the fields fail, your people die. Quirky fact, in some villages, desperate peasants turned to weather magic, leaving offerings to saints or creating noise to chase away storms. Some even blamed neighboring villages for stealing the good weather. Let's just say meteorology wasn't quite an exact science yet. The only real backup plan was to cut your own food portions. You'd give the best bits to the children and eat the rest slowly, pretending it was enough. People boiled tree bark. They ground acorns into flour. They made soup out of weeds, and yet you still owe taxes. To your Lord, to the church, to the king eventually. Want to know what medieval taxes look like? You pay with grain eggs, pigs, firewood, or labor. It's not just income, they'll take your time too. A few days a month, you're forced to work directly on the Lord's land for free, called corvée. It's like jury duty, but if you don't show up, you could be whipped. Historians still debate whether peasants felt pride in their work, or whether they just endured it with grim resignation. Either way, no one romanticized it. No one looked out across the frozen field and whispered, "Ah, yes, the simple life." You're starting to see that now. You glance toward the manor house sitting smugly on the hill. It's not a castle, those are for really rich people, but it's stone, and it has a roof that doesn't leak. You've never been inside. Probably never will be. But you do know the taxes go up when the Lord wants a new cloak, or a wedding, or a horse, or a new roof on the manor. You and your neighbors bend your backs so that someone else can dine with a silver spoon. There's a story going around that someone tried to leave the village last summer. A young man, maybe 20. He just disappeared one night hoping to find work in a nearby town. They caught him 2 days later, made an example of him in the square. No one really talks about the details, but the silence says enough. Your hands are trembling now. Not from fear, just from fatigue. From the weight of knowing that even standing still costs you. That in this life rest is stolen, not given. You take a shaky breath. You try to imagine 20 more years of this. But that's the thing. You won't live that long. You wake the next morning, or maybe it's still the same day. Hard to tell, really. Time here feels stretched and smeared like mud across your boots. There's no clock ticking, no morning news, no friendly good morning text. Just the groan of wood beams, a rooster that never seems to stop crowing, and the dull ache in your joints reminding you that yes, this is still very real. And speaking of aches, let's talk about where you woke up, your home. Or rather, your assigned wooden box of shared misery. It's not much. 1 room, maybe 2 if your family is doing well. The walls are made of timber and wattle and daub, a fancy way of saying sticks smeared with mud and straw. The roof sags a little. It's thatched, which sounds cozy until you realize that means mice live in it. And they're not quiet about it either. There's no chimney. The smoke from your hearth just sort of hangs there, trapped, circulating, burning your eyes while you cook, while you sleep, while you try to breathe without coughing up black soot. You think you can open a window, but you only have one, and it's the size of a dinner plate. Glass, not a chance. Just a wooden shutter that creaks open like a haunted cupboard door. The smell is layered. Old sweat, damp earth, boiled root vegetables, a hint of sheep. And on especially festive days, the smell of your neighbor's goat, who sometimes wanders inside for warmth. You share the space with your family, your livestock, and possibly several fleas you've given pet names by now. Sir Bites-a-Lot is particularly persistent. You try to stretch, but your straw mattress crunches. It's not soft. It's filled with actual straw stuffed in a canvas sack, maybe sprinkled with herbs if you're lucky. Some people use dried heather, but either way it pokes, and pokes, and pokes. Your back will never forgive you. The floor is dirt, not a euphemism. Just honest-to-God dirt packed hard over years of stomping feet and spilled stew. In winter it gets wet. In summer it gets dusty. You sweep it with a handmade broom that mostly just redistributes the grime. Rugs are for nobles. You're lucky if you have a clean cloth to put under your knees. Outside, the world isn't much brighter. Your yard is a narrow space behind the house where you dump waste and hope the rain takes it away. You relieve yourself in a bucket chamber pots if you're fancy, and empty it down a trench or into the nearest ditch. The term indoor plumbing won't exist for several more centuries. You miss toilets, desperately. There's a communal well in the village, but in winter the water freezes. In summer it turns murky. Everyone uses it. Everyone drops things into it. No one filters it. Boiling water helps if you have the firewood to spare. Spoiler, you usually don't. You wash your hands with cold water and lye soap if you're lucky enough to have soap. Most days you just rub with ash or sand. It scrapes, it stings, and it doesn't really clean. But hey, at least the germs don't know they exist yet. That's one less thing to feel guilty about. You don't really bathe. Not because you're gross, but because it's hard. Firewood is precious, and heating water takes time. You might bathe once every few months in a wooden tub with your entire family taking turns in the same water. By the end, it's basically stew. Fun, right? Quirky fact of the day, medieval people did believe in cleanliness. But cleanliness wasn't the same as being washed. You could change your undergarments regularly and be considered clean even if you hadn't touched water in weeks. In fact, linens were prized. Richer folks changed their linen shirts often and thought that absorbed body oils like a fabric sponge. Not ideal, but creative. Now clothing. You've got a wool tunic. It's scratchy, unevenly dyed, and smells faintly of lanolin and fire smoke. If you're a woman, it's longer layered and belted at the waist. You wear an apron if you're working, which is always. And if you're married, you probably wear some kind of head covering. Not for style, for status. And to keep your hair out of the soup. You have one outfit. Two if you're incredibly lucky. They get washed once in a blue moon. Holes are patched with whatever scrap you can find. There's no such thing as fashion, just not naked. You feel it now in every thread of your clothing, the weight of repetition. You wear the same thing, sleep in the same space, breathe the same smoky air day after day. And somehow, this is what passes for normal. But here's the strange thing. You start to notice moments of adaptation. A neighbor offers you a piece of boiled cabbage. Someone shows you how to reknot your belt properly. A child teaches you a few words of the local dialect by pointing to things and laughing when you mess it up. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had strong community bonds or just tolerated each other out of necessity. But it's clear that in a world where your survival depends on the weather and your neighbor's goodwill, cooperation wasn't optional, it was oxygen. Still don't get too comfortable. Because remember, the Lord owns your house, your tools, your hands, and your time. And if he wants a new granary built, guess who's carrying the stones? If the church decides your village hasn't tithed enough, guess who's forking over eggs they can't afford to give? If the miller claims your flour isn't ground fine enough, guess who pays extra? Hint, it's you. It's always you. There's a kind of psychological weight that sets in after a while. A quiet, heavy fog. The realization that no matter how hard you work, you'll never own the space you sleep in. Never own the food you grow. That even your body is in some way leased by systems older than memory. You scratch your arm absently. Sir Bites-a-Lot is back. And you start to wonder, how did people keep going? Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was just the momentum of waking up each morning because no one had invented giving up yet. But one thing's for sure, you'd kill for a hot shower right now. The afternoon light has turned a tired sort of gray, and a wet breeze snakes through the village paths like it has secrets to deliver. Your stomach growls again, not in hunger exactly, but in protest. The pottage helped, sure. But now the effects are settling in, and you realize something medieval peasants knew all too well. Just because it's food doesn't mean it won't try to kill you later. You glance toward a communal garden where a few knobby vegetables push through frost-hardened soil. A woman pulls up a turnip the size of a clenched fist, holds it up like a prize, then drops it into a basket half full of other roots and greens that all look like they were grown under stress. Which, to be fair, they were, because this isn't a world of abundance. This is a world of just enough. Just enough barley to make bread. Just enough oats for thin gruel. Just enough weeds to boil into something vaguely stew-like. Your medieval menu is about as exciting as a wet sock, and that's on a good day. Let's break it down. Your staple food is Lucomber bread. Not fluffy, crusty baguette bread, more like a dense grayish brick made from barley, rye, or millet. Wheat, the good stuff, is expensive. Nobles eat wheat. You get the scraps. And by scraps, we mean rough, stone-ground flour filled with bits of dirt and the occasional pebble from the millstone. Dental care doesn't exist here, but broken molars absolutely do. You gnaw on a crust someone gives you and immediately regret it. It's dry, coarse, and tastes faintly like the sack it was stored in. But you keep chewing. You have to. Next comes pottage, which is both a noun and a lifestyle. Think of it as eternal soup, a mix of whatever's around onions, beans, herbs, maybe a shred of salted pork if you're blessed and left to simmer day after day. It never truly finishes. You just keep adding to it, stirring occasionally, and hoping no one drops a spoon in. It's not terrible. It's warm. It fills the belly. But it doesn't change. There's no garlic bread on the side. No little burst of lemon zest to brighten it up. Just beige on beige forever. On rare feast days, someone might roast a chicken. You'll smell it before you see it, and if you're lucky, you'll get a sliver. But usually, meat, sow, is off limits. Forest animals belong to the Lord. Hunt them and you're a poacher, and being caught poaching isn't just a slap on the wrist. It's lashes, maybe mutilation, maybe worse. That rabbit stew could cost you a hand. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were as monotonous as records suggest. Some say local gardens provided more variety than we think. Others point to famine records that show just how fragile food supply really was. But what's not debated is this. You're always on the edge of Hunofworm, of hunger, of deficiency, of illness. And here's the kicker, that lovely rye bread. It might be laced with ergot, a fungus that grows on damp grains. You can't see it. You can't smell it. But eat enough of it, and suddenly you're not just hungry, you're hallucinating. Your fingers cramp. Your skin burns. Your limbs go numb. This is St. Anthony's fire, a charming nickname for a deeply uncharming disease. Fingers blacken, toes fall off. People dance uncontrollably in the streets, shrieking until they collapse. Some historians believe ergot poisoning may have inspired tales of possession madness, and even the infamous dancing plagues. And you were just trying to eat lunch. You shake it off, eyes drifting toward a nearby family, laying flatbread over a hot stone. A child carefully ladles thin porridge into wooden bowls. They eat slowly, reverently. No one wastes a drop. The silence isn't awkward, it's practical. Talking takes energy. So does chewing. You sit near the fire, if not invited, then at least tolerated. The warmth is intoxicating. Someone hands you a piece of soft cheese that smells like old socks, but tastes oddly pleasant. You nod in thanks, trying to memorize every detail. Quirky fact. While peasants didn't eat much meat, they did ferment, preserve, and pickle anything they could. Cheese was a staple. So was ale mild, low alcohol and safer than the water. Even children drank it. Fermentation, the unsung hero of survival. Someone offers you a sip of the house brew. It's warm flat and tastes like what beer might taste like if it were made in a sock. Still, it goes down easy, and for a fleeting moment, you feel human again. But comfort is short-lived, because tomorrow, or maybe next week, the Chacas grain stores might run low. A late frost could wipe out the barley. A wet spring could drown the oats. And if famine comes, you won't be able to fight it off. Malnutrition is already working against you. Your immune system is weak. A minor infection could become something major. Your wounds heal slowly. Your skin cracks. You start to lose the strength even to carry a bucket or hoist a bag of grain. You remember a story someone told around the fire, that last winter a boy ate bark from a tree just to make his stomach stop crying. His family found him shivering, fingers blue. He didn't last the week. And then, as if to mock your memories, you catch the scent of something richer. Spices. Your nose turns instinctively toward the manor house. Inside, nobles are dining on meat pies, spiced wine, honeyed fruit. They're using imported ingredients, saffron, cloves, cinnamon brought from distant lands, by trade routes you'll never see. Their bread is white and soft. Their meats are tender and hot. And yes, they might get poisoned by lead-glazed plates or over-salted pork, but at least they're dying full. You are not. And even if you somehow stumbled into the kitchen and stole a crust, you'd pay. The punishment for stealing even for food is swift and harsh. Public shaming, mutilation, sometimes death. You glance back at the fire circle. A woman is stirring the pottage again, scraping the bottom to make sure nothing goes to waste. A child offers you the crust from her bowl. She smiles, small and kind. You nod and take it, chewing slowly. There's no dessert here, just survival, and the quiet, relentless hunger that never quite leaves. You finish the crust of bread slowly, almost thoughtfully, as if chewing it slower might convince your stomach there's more where that came from. There isn't. The warmth of the fire beside the communal pot is fading with the sun, and people start drifting away to their homes, their smoke-filled, flea-infested, blessedly familiar corners of the world. You, however, linger a little longer, because you know something they don't. You don't belong here. Not really. Not even close. And as darkness thickens around the village, a different kind of danger creeps in. The kind you can't fight with firewood or a pot of boiled roots. The kind where rules bend, where order frays, where something as simple as an accusation can erase you. Because tonight, you're going to learn how justice works. In the Middle Ages. Spoiler, it doesn't. Let's say someone accuses you of theft, or blasphemy, or just acting strange, which you've definitely been doing. There's no police station to walk into, no Miranda rights, no forensic evidence. What you get instead is a hue and cry. Literally a group of people yelling and chasing you down until someone grabs your arm or tackles you to the ground. You're dragged to the village square, dirt in your mouth, and everything smells like burning pine. A crowd gathers not out of malice necessarily, but because this is the most exciting thing to happen all week. No judge, no lawyer, no presumption of innocence. What you get is a priest or a reeve or maybe a bailiff, depending on where you landed in this muddy slice of England. If the accusation is serious, you might face trial by ordeal. And oh, it's just as awful as it sounds. Here's how it works. If you're accused of a crime, and there's no way to prove your innocence, they leave it up to God. You might be forced to stick your arm into boiling water to retrieve a stone, or walk barefoot across red-hot iron, or carry a burning rod 9 paces. If your wounds heal cleanly in a few days, congratulations, you're innocent. If they fester, Well, guess you were guilty after all. Historians still argue whether trial by ordeal was taken literally or just symbolically, if priests ever fudged the results to spare someone. But for most common folk, it was real. It was terrifying. And it was final. Now let's say your crime was petty. Something like swearing in public or playing football on Sunday or being in debt. You wouldn't be burned or boiled, but you wouldn't exactly walk away either. You might be sent to the stocks, where your ankles and wrists are locked in place so villagers can throw mud or worse at your face for hours. If you were lucky, it ended with a bruised ego. If you weren't well, open wounds and poor sanitation are a dangerous mix. Quirky fact, some towns had a scold's bridle. A metal cage placed over the head of a woman accused of gossiping too much. It had a little metal tongue plate that pressed into the mouth to keep her quiet. Imagine being publicly humiliated and physically silenced at the same time. Charming, right? And then there's the branding. If you stole something of value, say more than 12 pennies, you could be marked for life. The letter T for thief burned into your flesh. Not just painful, permanent. And yes, people would stare. And yes, it would hurt every time you touched cold water. Sometimes you'd be imprisoned. But don't imagine a jail with steel bars and security cameras. Picture instead a dank, damp hole beneath a church or manor house with rats for roommates and a diet of bread crusts and water that might also have rat in it. Many prisoners didn't live long enough to be judged. And what about your accuser? Do they need proof, a witness? Not really. Just enough people nodding or the approval of a church official, or maybe just the bad luck of having made someone angry last week. Because in this world, power talks. If the bailiff's cousin doesn't like you, that's a problem. If the priest thinks your behavior is unusual, that's worse. If a nobleman's son says you stole his glove, your only real defense is divine intervention. And sometimes even God's truth is a crime. There are laws, sumptuary laws, that dictate what you can wear. If you dress above your station, you're punished. If you wear the wrong shoes or fabric that's seen as arrogance, you're reminded that the lines between people here are not meant to blur. You suddenly remember the way the villagers looked at you when you first arrived. The strange fabric of your hoodie, your soft shoes, your foreign posture, your inability to say good morrow properly. It's a miracle they haven't accused you of witchcraft yet. You walk carefully now, shoulders hunched, trying not to look too different. But it's hard to hide. You're still taller than most. Your gaze still lingers too long. You still flinch when someone raises their voice. And if you think the church will protect you, think again. Church Kapten doesn't just govern the soul here, it governs your daily life. What you eat, when you eat, what you wear, how much you pay. If you eat meat on a Friday, if you miss Mass, if you speak against a priest, you're in trouble. And the punishments aren't just spiritual, they're social, economic, physical. Your neighbors might shun you, your Lord might fine you, the priest might denounce you publicly, and in a world where reputation is survival that's more dangerous than a sword. You pass a wooden board nailed to the church wall. On it, a list of fines, one for missing Sunday service, one for swearing in the tavern, one for spreading rumors about a widow. The costs vary, but the result is the same. Control. It's night now, and you're sitting outside, back pressed against a barn door, watching the stars emerge like quiet judges. Someone once said the stars were holes poked into heaven's floor, so the light could leak through. You wonder what medieval you would have thought of that. You hear a distant bell toll. A dog howls in answer. The village settles. You close your eyes. And for just a second, you think if you had to stay, could you do it? But then you remember the boiling water and the letter T, and the silence that comes not from peace but from fear. You wake with a start to the sound of shouting, deep, guttural, and urgent. The kind of yelling that shakes your spine before your brain fully understands why. Someone's banging on a wooden door nearby. Another voice yells something back. You catch a few words, levy men, lords' orders, and that's when it hits you. You're going to war. Well, not a real army, not yet. More like a quick, desperate conscription effort. A few men in patched armor have arrived on horseback carrying pikes and scrolls announcing that every able-bodied peasant must present himself by dawn. Bring your own weapon if you have one, or bring a shovel. And just like that, your life as a half-fed, overworked farmhand is being upgraded to a half-fed, overworked soldier. You don't get a say in it, because this is feudalism. Remember, you don't belong to yourself. You belong to the land. And when that land's lord decides it's time to fight his neighbor, his cause becomes your obligation. You owe him service, blood if necessary. Historians still argue whether peasant levies were effective or just cannon fodder. Either way you're going. Because not going means punishment. And the Middle Ages has a very creative imagination when it comes to punishments. You're handed a rusty spear that looks like it's been buried in a swamp. A man beside you mutters, "This one belonged to my uncle. Lost him at Crécy." You don't ask how. You already know. The village women gather, silently watching their brothers, sons, husbands, and neighbors shuffle into a line. A few offer bread, a flask of ale, a whispered prayer. You notice one girl slip a charm into her brother's pocket, a small cloth pouch with herbs, maybe garlic, maybe something else. Protection or hope or just the last thing she could give him. You march, no training, no map. No idea who the enemy even is. Just a road and a direction, and the occasional sharp rock underfoot. Quirky fact, some medieval armies didn't even keep lists of common soldiers. If you were a noble, your name and deeds were recorded. If you were a peasant, you were just 24 from Wexford, or 20 levied from the north. If you died anonymously. After a day of marching, you stop in a clearing. A makeshift camp is forming blankets laid on the ground fires being lit with damp wood. The men talk quietly. You don't ask questions. You're already learning that in this world, curiosity is dangerous and silence keeps you alive. You try to sleep, but the air is cold and the ground is harder than anything you've ever laid on. Your bones ache. Your stomach is empty. And fear gnaws at you in a quiet, persistent rhythm. Because tomorrow, or maybe the next day, you'll be in the middle of something that no one fully understands. Warkituk you never wanted. And medieval warfare, it's chaos. Forget uniforms. Forget clear alliances. Battles are muddy, confusing, loud, and bloody. You'll probably be placed in the front line with 100 others, just like you, farmers, blacksmiths, carpenters, who are holding spears like broomsticks and praying not to be first. You hear it before you see it, the sound of drums, metal clanging, horses, voices chanting. The ground trembles just enough to remind you how small you are, and then clash. Everything becomes noise, screaming, steel on wood. Something cracks beside you. You see a man fall, then another. Blood flies. You don't know where to look. Someone grabs your arm, shoves you forward. You swing your spear at a blur of movement and feel nothing. Or maybe something. It's hard to tell with your heart trying to escape your chest. Time slows. Then it speeds up. Then it's over. You're alive. Somehow. You're covered in dirt, sweat, and something sticky that might not be yours. Your spear is gone. Your knees are shaking, and the dead. They're everywhere. No ceremony, no silence, just bodies. Some are buried, some are left behind, some are stripped of anything useful. There's no room for reverence, only practicality. You help dig graves, or more often drag the fallen into shallow pits and toss dirt over them. Your back screams, your fingers blister, but you keep going. Because even here in the wake of horror, the only thing that moves the world forward is labor. Later that night, by firelight, a soldier passes around a flask of something harsh. You take a sip and feel it scorch your throat. Someone starts humming a tune, slow, low, barely a melody. Others join in. It's not joyful. It's just human. That's something medieval soldiers knew well. The singing, the praying, the quiet attempts to knit sanity together while surrounded by bones. You overhear someone say this battle was part of a larger war. Maybe the 100 Years' War, or maybe just one of the endless squabbles between minor lords. It doesn't matter. You realize now war isn't rare in this world. It's Constantia, from 500 to 1500 Europe alone, saw over 370 distinct conflicts. Crusades, border disputes, civil wars, dynastic clashes. Some lasted years, some lasted hours. But they always left behind the same thing: widows, orphans, broken bodies, and fields too soaked in blood to grow grain the next spring. One man talks about the siege of Jerusalem. 90,000 dead, he says, like he's counting sheep. Another mentions the Mongol invasions. They say 40 million died, he whispers. You don't even try to grasp that number. It doesn't feel real. You look at the stars again. They're the only familiar thing in this world. You wonder if the people you just fought were really enemies, or just other peasants shoved into armor and handed spears, told to march and bleed and obey. Historians still debate whether medieval soldiers believed in the causes they fought for, or whether survival was the only cause that ever really mattered. You think you know the answer now. You return to the village weeks later, thinner, quieter, not proud, just breathing. People greet you with small nods. No cheers, no songs, no questions. Just relief that you're not one of the missing. You pass by the girl who gave her brother a charm. She doesn't look up. You don't sleep well after you return from the war, not that anyone really does around here. The straw mattress feels different now. Thinner. The aches in your legs don't go away like they used to, and sometimes your hands shake when no one's watching. But that's not what bothers you most. What gets under your skin, what burrows in deeper than the cold, or the noise, or even the memory of that field littered with the dead, is this quiet, persistent thought. What if you'd been lucky? What if instead of coming back here to your smoky, dirt-floored hut, you had been born on the other side of the hill? What if you'd been one of the rich? Would that have saved you? Let's test the theory. Let's say you wake up tomorrow as a noble, a landowner, someone with power, with servants, with embroidered sleeves and boots that don't leak. Would your life be easier, longer, healthier? Maybe, but don't exhale just yet. Because in the Middle Ages, even wealth couldn't save you from the rot. To start, yes, your diet changes dramatically. No more pottage, no more barley loaves and onion broth. You're eating meat now. Lots of it. Roasted pork with apples, venison in heavy cream, spiced pigeon, trout baked in pastry, and the bread. Oh, it's white and fluffy, made from refined wheat sifted so fine it feels like silk between your fingers. You're served by kitchen staff who spend their entire lives prepping feasts you'll barely finish. You drink wine and mead from gilded cups. You dab your lips with linen napkins. You might even own salt, which is basically the medieval equivalent of having a black Amex. Sounds great, right? Except there's a catch. Several, actually. Let's start with the poison. Those fancy glazed plates you're eating from, they're covered in lead oxide. That glaze keeps them shiny, yes, makes them easy to clean. But the moment you put anything acidic like vinegar, wine, or even fruit on them, the lead starts to seep into your food. And lead doesn't just pass through your system, it stays. It collects in your bones, in your brain. Over time, it damages your nerves. It gives you headaches. It robs your memory. It steals your fertility. It destroys your kidneys. Sometimes it kills you outright, but more often it just makes you sick, slowly, quietly, confusingly. Children are especially vulnerable. In fact, recent studies of medieval skeletons from wealthier graves in places like Germany and Denmark have shown lead levels well above modern safety thresholds. Their wealth was poisoning them literally. And it doesn't stop at plates. Your ma coins, leaded. Your ha roof tiles, also lead. Rainwater that runs off those roofs is collected for drinking and cooking. Congratulations, you're sipping neurotoxins with your supper. And if the lead doesn't get you the ergato might. Because yes, even the rich ate bread. And unless your grain was scrupulously cleaned and dried, and often it wasn't, you were still at risk for the same fungal infections that haunted the peasants. Hallucinations, burning limbs, the dreaded dancing sickness where people convulsed and writhed in the streets until they collapsed from exhaustion. Historians still argue whether those outbreaks were caused by mass hysteria or ergot poisoning or some terrible mix of both. But either way, the line between noble and dead was not nearly as thick as the tapestries on your walls. Now let's talk the medicine, or what passed for medicine. You're rich, so you have access to physicians. But those physicians learned everything they know from Galen, a Roman doctor who died over 1,000 years ago. Most of his teachings are built around balancing the four humors blood phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Got a headache? You've got too much heat. Got a fever? Time to bleed you. Got stomach cramps? Let's try leeches, and bleed you they will. They'll open a vein and drain a pint or two into a silver bowl. You'll faint maybe, but that's just the sickness leaving your body, they say. You could also be prescribed a concoction of herbs, mercury ground pearls, or boiled down animal parts. Sometimes you'll be advised to sniff burnt feathers, or drink water that's been blessed and then stirred with a sword. These are real treatments, documented, repeated. To be fair, a few medieval remedies do show signs of early science: honey for wounds, vinegar for cleaning. But most were just best guesses in a very dark room, and you're still surrounded by proof. The Black Death didn't care about status. If anything, wealthy households with more staff and visitors were more exposed. The disease moved on fleas, on rats, on ships, on travelers, on priests. It came through your town like a storm. One week people are dancing. The next they're being carted off by the dozens. Even if you survive the first wave, you live in fear of the second. Or the third. Entire family lines vanish in months. Some villages are so empty the animals wander freely through the streets. And let's not forget politics. Being rich means you're always a target. One bad rumor, one angry cousin, one jealous rival at court, and suddenly you're being accused of treason, or heresy, or conspiracy. And if you're not executed, you might just be quietly removed. Sent to a monastery, banished, poisoned if they're feeling subtle. You sit at a table set for 20, but you trust maybe 3 people in the room. You sip your wine and wonder if someone has finally decided to end your inheritance dispute the old-fashioned way. Even love is a transaction. You'll likely marry for power, or land, or title. Your spouse may be 15, or 40, or cruel, or all of the above. If you're lucky, they're indifferent. If you're not, they're watching you carefully every time you touch your food. So yes, you're warm. You're full. You wear soft velvet and sleep on cushions. But your body is slowly rotting from within. Your mind is clouded by metals. Your heirs are in danger. Your doctors are guessing. Your food might kill you. And the church is always, always watching. You're not a survivor. You're just dying in silk. The sky is the color of old ashes when you wake. You're not even sure you slept, not really. Your body feels like it's been scraped out and filled with stone. Your back throbs. Your fingers are stiff from cold and work. Your breath fogs in the air as you sit up slowly, carefully on a bed that is not a bed, but just a flattened sack of straw damp in the corners, already home to a few beetles that didn't ask permission to share your space. You hear chickens before you see them scratching at the packed earth outside the door. Someone's shouting at a pig in the distance. Somewhere water spills from a bucket and hits the ground like a warning. You swing your legs over the edge of the straw and let your feet find the dirt floor. Still here. Still real. Still in a time that doesn't want you. You step outside into a world that smells of smoke manure and the barest whisper of spring. It should feel like hope, but it doesn't. It feels like waiting, like something bad that hasn't quite happened yet. The streets are still wet from last night's rain. Puddles reflect the thatched roofs and warped beams of the houses around you. You move slowly, passing familiar faces that don't feel familiar. The woman who gave you soup last week. The boy with the sunken eyes and perpetual cough. The old man who mutters to himself and spits in the same spot every morning. They're all here, still alive, still going. But no one looks up as you pass. No one smiles. No one greets. Because in the dark ages, you keep your head down. Even now, after everything you find yourself thinking. Surely it can't get worse. Surely after war, famine, childbirth, branding disease, and burning fever, there must be something like comfort, like safety, like an edge to the nightmare. But the truth is, you're only just beginning to understand what it means to live here, to truly exist in a world that is not designed to keep you safe or even sane. Because the Dark Ages weren't just brutal, they were relentless. Day after day, the same hunger, the same work, the same dirt under your nails and fear behind your eyes, the same watchful silence that follows you when you walk past the church, the same guilt when you sneeze and wonder if it's the plague. You've survived disease, yes, but do you feel healthy, strong? No. Your joints ache. Your breath sometimes catches. There's a spot on your leg that won't heal. You're 28 maybe, and you feel older than your grandfather ever did. You've seen people half your age buried under wet soil. You've seen a woman bleed out on straw while the midwife crossed herself and whispered prayers through trembling lips. You've seen things that no one should see, and you've had no choice but to keep going. So you do. You walk the edge of the village and gaze into the trees. The forest is quiet, but not empty. You know better now. You know that quiet means watchfulness, that something could be watching you. Someone. A bandit. A wolf. A wandering man with nothing left to lose. You turn back, and there it is again, that thought, that ache in your chest. What if you'd stayed rich? What if you had gold, a manor servant status? What if you could afford spices, music, warm boots, and good bread? Wouldn't that fix everything? You know the answer now. You've seen the answer. Because even behind stone walls and velvet drapes, people are dying. Maybe slower, maybe with more ceremony, but dying all the same. From lead-glazed plates, from poisoned wine, from bored rivals who send rumors out like arrows, from physicians who treat fevers with bloodletting and sadness with purgatives, from the simple, unfixable fact that no one understands the human body. Not really. And worse, they think they do. They think a fever means too much yellow bile. They think a headache means sin. They think madness is possession, and a cough is punishment, and a stillborn baby means the mother offended God. There's no peace here, not even for the privileged, because the Dark Ages don't care if you wear silk or sackcloth, if you sleep on goose feathers or straw, if you pray twice a day or not at all. They take everyone. And when the sun goes down and there's no candle left to light, the world shrinks into the dark. You sit by the hearth, if you're lucky enough to have one, and listen to the fire crackle low. The shadows move like they're alive. Every creak, every moan of wind becomes something to brace against. There are no flashlights, no switches, only flame and fear, because the dark is not just absence of light. It's absence of answers, of certainty, of knowing what waits outside your door or in the next room or behind your thoughts. Superstition thrives here, not because people are foolish, but because they are desperate. They light candles on certain days, hang herbs above the door, whisper prayers backwards to keep spirits away. Not because it's quaint, but because it's all they have. You've started doing it too. You don't speak certain names. You throw salt over your shoulder. You touch the wood beam above the hearth 3 times every morning before stepping outside. Not because you believe, but because now you're afraid not to. Historians still debate whether the medieval world was truly as superstitious as folklore makes it seem, or whether our modern bias just amplifies the strangeness of their rituals. But standing here now in this cold, flickering silence, you understand. It doesn't matter. What matters is survival, and survival in this world isn't logical. It's habitual, instinctual, sometimes absurd, but always necessary. You close your eyes. You've lasted longer than anyone thought you would, but deep down, you know the truth. Clutch, you haven't survived. You've endured, and there's a difference. The fire has gone out. Only a few quiet embers remain glowing gently in the ash, like distant stars trying to remember how to shine. The hut is still. The village has folded in on itself, tucked beneath layers of smoke and night and silence. Even the wind has softened, drifting lazily through the thatch. No longer sharp, no longer urgent. You're lying on the straw again, curled into the smallest version of yourself. And it occurs to you the world has always been hard, but not always loud. Sometimes it crushes gently, quietly, like the weight of time pressing on your ribs. But in this stillness, there is something else. Not comfort, not peace. Something smaller. Something closer to understanding. You've seen the ache behind the stories, the raw, rough edges of a world without mercy. You've walked in the dust of forgotten lives and listened to their silence. You've felt the scratch of wool and the sting of smoke and the hollow hush that lives where hope used to be. And through it all, you've stayed. You didn't run. You didn't look away. You listened, so now finally you let go. You let the night cover you soft and slow. You let the weight of all that was settle into your bones, not to harm you, but to remind you that even in darkness there is depth, there is story, there is meaning. And with that thought you exhale. The last ember fades, and the Middle Ages, so fierce, so loud, so impossible, recedes inch by inch into the hush of sleep. Let it go now. Let it all go. You're safe. You're home, and you made it through the night.